Hello there, and welcome back to the TCM YouTube channel where we are continuing our 2023 county previews. And next up, we have Gloucestershire, and joining us for this one is BBC commentator Ed Seabourne. Ed, thank you very much for joining us. How are you, first of all, and how excited are you for the 2023 season to get underway?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks very much for having me on. I touched down a few days ago from a holiday in Scandinavia, so I'm still a little bit at the stage of what's a Gloucestershire. But no, I'm feeling prepared. I'm feeling ready. It's an exciting season because we've got, I think, one of the most intriguing things about the season is this new points system. We've kind of got the Bazball points system where we want to see more runs. We want to see higher scores. We want to see lots of fast scoring. And how's that going to affect how teams play? Personally, I'm not sure I can see it affecting Gloucestershire that much because they tend to go about their 4-day cricket a certain way. But other teams may decide to go all in on it because everybody's going to be after selection. So for the Ashes and for future series. So it's a really exciting season. And I can't wait, even if Gloucestershire are a division lower than last season.
Yeah, absolutely. It will be. And you've touched on it there. We always like to start with a little reflection on last season. Obviously, 10th in Division 1, relegated into Division 2 in the County Championship, 5th in the One Day Cup Group A, and 5th in the Vitality Blast South Group. What do they need to improve on this summer to really push for some sort of title charges or even those top places?
Well, I think starting off with a championship, I think actually, assuming they can pick it up where they left off at the end of last season, I'm not sure they really need to do that much because they won their last couple of matches and had a really good draw at Taunton, which, were it not for the weather, they'd have had a very good chance of winning. So they may well have won their last three. So there's every chance if they can pick that form up and take it into this season that they don't need to do too much. But I think really you look at bowling and batting separately. Batting wise, they had too many innings where somebody got 100 at the top and nobody else got runs. So very often it was Dent or Harris or Bracey, one of those three got a big score at the top. And there just wasn't that support to turn the scores of about 300 into the scores of 400, which you need on the pitches that they're likely to be playing on again this season. You need those big runs. That's what we're after now, it seems. So that's one thing. Bowling wise, I think the return of Tom Price from university last year and the return of David Payne from injury made a massive difference to that bowling attack. And it just gave them that potent seam weaponry to go with Zafar Gohar, who, in my opinion, is possibly the best spinner in the county championship. I mean, plenty of people will go straight to Simon Harmer on that, but Zafar has not got much to work with those Bristol pitches, and he had a magnificent season last year with both bat and ball. So, looking ahead to this season, I think it's the fitness of those key members that a lot depends on. And of course, one of those three is already down. David Payne will be out, I think, until the blast. So that's a really big blow for Gloucestershire's bowling attack. But maybe the others can step up and fill that void. They're going to have to. But I think, yeah, looking at it in terms of batting and bowling, those are probably the main issues as far as the championship is concerned anyway.
Yeah, and one man you mentioned there is Tom Price. He's just extended his contract at Gloucestershire through till 2025. He had a big impact last year in all competitions, but particularly county championship. I wonder whether you think this year he's really going to come into his own. Obviously, you talked there about David Payne's injury. Do you think he's going to be the one who's going to take that place and develop and just come into his own and get loads of wickets this season?
Well, I think he's going to have to. If Gloucestershire are going to have success, then he's really looking like the leader of the attack at such a young age. But he's a really impressive individual. He's not fast, but he does a lot with the ball, even on surfaces where nobody is getting anything out of them. These turgid pancake-like surfaces that we saw last year. he was able to get in swing really at all times. And in swing is just deadly. I mean, you think back to the end of last season, took 8 for 24, I think it was, which are the best figures by any Gloucestershire bowler this millennium. And he was just getting that ball to come in through the gate. And with the techniques of modern batters trying to stay leg side of the ball, leaving themselves open, in swing is just the most deadly weapon you can have. And he's got a really natural in swing delivery, which causes a lot of problems. Hopefully he continues where he left off. Obviously a magnificent end to last season, averaged nearly 20 with the ball, which is just ludicrous on those surfaces. And then it wasn't just last year, he was pretty good towards the end of 2021 as well. So I'm hoping for big things. And the other thing is that Tom Price can bat, and we've seen that on occasions last year. He'll be starting off with the first game at Glamorgan, where he scored his maiden first-class 50, so happy memories there. And yeah, he's a huge part of any success Gloucestershire will have this season in the Championship for certain.
So new talents coming through then, but also the loss of some old talent. Benny Howell has obviously departed to Hampshire. What impact do you think that's going to have on Gloucestershire this season? Because obviously he was a bit of an integral part of that Gloucestershire side.
Yeah, well, I suppose we're more now moving towards looking at the Blast, aren't we? Because Benny Howell's not played in any format other than the Blast for the last 2 years, with the 100 meaning he's out of the Royal London. So looking ahead to the Blast, yes, enormous losses for Gloucestershire. They've lost Howell, they've lost Ian Cobain, their all-time leading run scorer in T20 cricket, and they've lost Ryan Higgins, who, whilst his loss in a way, whilst it is a massive loss to the team, they affected the turnaround last year without having Higgins in the side. So I suppose that gives some cause for hope that things aren't quite as bleak as they might be if you'd say lost Higgins having had a magnificent 2022 season. But it's massive as far as what it does for Gloucestershire and their middle order in the Blast, because that was their huge strength. They just kept coming at you with Cobain, Howell, Higgins, Bracey if he was playing, the explosivity at the top of the order, and then of course Glenn Phillips, who has been superb for Gloucestershire the last 2 seasons. I understand he won't be coming back, so there's another loss for Gloucestershire's batting lineup. So really they are kind of decimated, their T20 side. I've heard already that dreadful word, sort of rebuilding.
That was going to be my next question. Would you feel that this is going to be more of a rebuilding, recuperating sort of season in the Vitality Blast for Gloucestershire?
Yes, I do think so. However, the one thing that I think, and I don't like when I'm commentating, when I'm sitting on a podcast, to be an armchair coach, but I'm going to be this time. I think this is the chance for Gloucestershire maybe to reshuffle things a little bit in the Blast. Maybe bring Jack Taylor up the order. For example, he had a tremendous Royal London campaign, and I just think get him facing more deliveries. Graham Van Buren's missed the last effectively 2 Blast seasons, last year through injury and the year before through registration issues. So he's effectively almost a new signing for the Blast. There are players that can step up in the Blast, but it's going to take tremendous seasons out of, say, the likes of Chris Dent. Chris Dent's runs propelled Gloucestershire effectively to finals day the last time they made it in 2020. So if he were to have a big season, say, if Jack Taylor were to step up and the bowling attack does what it might be able to do, the likes of Tom Smith and hopefully David Payne back from injury are still there. So they still have experienced operators, but I do fear that probably the best success Gloucestershire will have on finals day this year is another win for Alfred the Gorilla.
Still fuming about that because Lanky was going to win that. It was all Lankies, and then it just wasn't. Anyway, let's stick with white ball. Obviously, the One Day Cup as well. How would you rate their chances going into that tournament? Obviously, impact of the 100. You know, some of your players may not be there, but James Bracey was James Bracey there last year? I'm not sure whether I
Yeah.
think he was there last year. Yeah, you know, maybe compared to some other counties, you're not going to lose as many players to the 100 as you may expect. So do you think that gives Gloucestershire an advantage? Do you think Gloucestershire have the best chance of winning in the One Day Cup?
Yeah, I kind of feel as if, I mean, you're doing these previews for every county. I sort of feel as if you'll probably talk to about 9 or 10 people, and they'll tell you that they feel their best chance of silverware is the Royal London, because it is so unpredictable in a way. And we're going into the season, and yes, the draft for the 100 will be coming up, so they'll have a better idea of who will be taking part in the Royal London for Gloucestershire after that. But even then, you don't know whether that's going to be the final team, because somebody could have a magnificent blast and they'll be one of those wild card picks. So you could end up losing somebody on the verge of the competition. And Gloucestershire know all about that, if not necessarily through the wild card pick. But last year, Graham Van Buren was supposed to be their captain going into that, and he got picked up right before the start of the season. All of a sudden, you've lost your captain for that format. And Jack Taylor did a magnificent job in that, but it just shows you the kind of volatility of the competition. So having said that, I think Gloucestershire will have a good side in it, regardless of who gets picked up. And if you did say add the likes of Miles Hammond, Graham Van Buren, Marchand de Lange, all of whom may get picked up, may not. Who knows? These drafts are so wild. You just don't know what's going to happen in them. So they had a good side last year. I feel they probably should have qualified, but there was just that kind of hangover of all the losses from the start of the season. It was kind of, and I kind of thought of it in my head a little bit like watching the death of Boromir in Lord of the Rings, sort of one arrow just going close range, you know, just one after the other. That was kind of how the start of last season was. And it took an awful lot to pick them up at the start of that Royal London. And they lost their first 2 games in that, then hit their stride and won, I think, what was it, 5 of the last 6 it had to be. So they are a good side. They made the playoffs in 2021. They almost made it last year. I think they really should be targeting a deep run in the Royal London this year, whether that's led by Jack Taylor or Graham Van Buren. They will have a decent side in it.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how they go in that. One man you mentioned there, signing bit of off-season business for you, stealing from Somerset, your greatest rivals, Marchand de Lange. How much of an impact do you think he's going to have in the season coming up for this Gloucestershire side? Will he provide that extra boost of experience, especially when you're playing Somerset?
Well, I'm hoping so, because at the moment he's in my fantasy squad. So I saw him as a sort of effectively low cost pickup, because he hadn't played much cricket last year. And I think he's kind of being slightly undervalued from that point of view. Anyway, enough of my fantasy team. I don't care about that. But in terms of real cricket, yes, I think he's somebody who can play across all formats, do a really good job on his day. We obviously know that he can have his off days as well, but then that's what you get with a bowler like that. He's going to run in and try and bowl as fast as he can. That's what he talks about doing. And Gloucestershire don't have really that point of difference at the moment. I've heard that Ajit Dale has put on a yard this winter, and he had quite a promising last season, championship wise especially. Certainly somebody to watch out for. He's got slightly unique action as well. You don't see many bowlers bowling the way that he does, quite slingy, skiddy pace. But what de Lange does is allow them to have more options as far as that kind of point of difference is concerned. And you hear that term used so much now. Teams need these points of difference. And Gloucestershire have got that with Zaffer in the spin department. Maybe they do have it with de Lange in the seam department. It remains to be seen exactly what his role will be, but I'm excited because he's a fantastic cricketer to watch, whether it's actually with ball or with bat as well. He can smack the ball a long way, especially in the Championship, which can be great fun to watch on those kind of dull. Well, no, not dull. I can't use that word. Slightly less entertaining afternoons where things are just kind of drifting along, and then along can come somebody like De Lange and just change the course of the afternoon with the bat. So I'm looking forward to seeing him. He seems like a really great bloke, and if he were to take Pfeiffer against Somerset at Bristol in the Blast, that would be magnificent.
Absolutely, it'd be very interesting to see what the Somerset fans make of that. Someone else who's also returning for the second year of his 2-year deal is Marcus Harris. What do you think him coming back for the second year? Because I know he was an integral part, I think it's fair to say, of Gloucestershire's side, especially in the One Day Cup, averaging 41.5, second highest run scorer, but across all formats. How do you think him coming back for a second year will provide stability for this Gloucestershire side?
Well, it's interesting you say across all formats, because it may be across all formats. I've heard that it's very much up in the air as to whether Gloucestershire will be getting another overseas player for the Blast. So Harris may even get to play in that. The one thing with Harris is Ashes selection. You just don't know if he's going to be picked or not. And if he is picked, he's only going to be the third opener, injuries aside. Warner and Khawaja are very much set, you would think, at the top of that order. Again, it could change, but particularly Khawaja has just been a revelation the last 12 months or so. So that's really kind of pushed Harris slightly to the side. So will he get picked? If he has a good start to the season, that probably increases his chances of getting picked. But I do think Gloucestershire have, from what Steve Snell, the performance director, has been saying, they've got a backup plan for if Harris does end up getting selected for the Ashes. So let's just assume he's there for the whole season. He piled on the runs for Leicestershire the last time he was in Division 2. So that's only going to increase, you would think, you would hope, his output of runs for the season. And he's just exactly what you would want in a Championship overseas batter. He doesn't care whether he bats right at the top of the order or if he bats at 3. He said he just doesn't care where he bats, but he churns out the runs in first-class cricket, and he's only seemingly getting better first-class-wise. He's done pretty well for Victoria in the Shield this winter, so his first-class average is getting closer and closer to 40, having been kind of late 30s, so it takes quite a lot of work when you've nearly played 150 first-class matches to get that average going up like that. So he's a consistent performer and is a really solid Championship batter. And then Royal London wise, like you say, he had an excellent year in that. Again, doesn't matter whether he opens or bats at 3. He's part of a really strong top order that Gloucestershire have in that competition, assuming that they will have the likes of Dent, Bracey, maybe Hammond as well, Ollie Price coming through, Jack Taylor. You know, that's quite a strong batting lineup for that competition. So, yeah, he's going to be important. And I do love watching him bat because he's just got that air of stability to him, which you want to have in your top order.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see the impact he has and whether he is picked for the Ashes, because that will obviously have a big impact. Now, someone else I want to talk about is James Bracey, because a few years ago, I don't know if you remember, you probably do, he was picked for England, and in quite a weird situation, COVID times, given one test match, didn't really had a tough test match, not through no fault of his own, probably thrown in at the deep end. But since then, it's all gone a bit quiet, I think it's fair to say, down the James Bracey end. He had a decent season last year. Do you think going forward this season, into this season, he's really going to propel himself and maybe push for those England chances again? Because I know that he would be probably enthusiastic to get into an England side.
Yeah, there's just so much to talk about with James Bracey, and he's a lovely lad. He's a Bristol man through and through, so he's got a place in every Gloucestershire supporter's heart. I think a lot depends on, again, what his role is going to be this season, because last year he started off at 3. There were a lot of games where he had the gloves on behind the stumps for 150 overs or so, and then was pretty much having to go straight out to bat again after having done that. And I know I've used this a couple of times last season, but there'll be people who haven't heard it. The stat after Ben Foakes scored his century at Old Trafford against South Africa last year was that was the first century scored by a keeper batter for England after they kept wicket since Matt Pryor scored a century in the Auckland Test that Monty and Jimmy, I think, ended up saving at the end in, what was it, 2012, something like that, maybe 2013. Anyway, it's a long time since that's happened. So it's not easy to keep wicket for that long and then go out and bat. So will he return to 3, which I think is the position that he wants to bat in, or will he be persuaded to drop down the order to 5, where he finished last season? I don't know. He had a great start to last season. He scored his career best against Yorkshire in the second game and arguably played an even better innings against Northamptonshire in the first match of the season. So he had a great start and then it just kind of tailed off championship-wise. So it's difficult to know exactly where Bracey's sitting as far as what his role is. But if he can be settled, and I think Gloucestershire's bowling attack taking more regular wickets will certainly help that as far as his stamina goes, then yeah, who knows? I think he has kind of forgotten about England. That certainly was what was said last year. And then it was almost as if the start of the season, those 2 big centuries before the start of the Test summer, kind of started the murmurings again about, well, Bracey's, is he on the verge of England? And then it's easy to fit the narrative to what happened. But what I want is just for Bracey to be left alone for a bit. I just want him to have a season, a couple of seasons, just to score a lot of runs in the Championship. And then the England talk can start again. That's my personal feeling. But again, he's going to be a vital cog in Gloucestershire's machine, probably across all 3 formats.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how he goes again, because I think he's a player that a lot of people have a lot of sympathy for in the way that he was given, thrown in at the deep end for England. And so it'll be good to see if he's doing well for Gloucestershire again. Just quickly then, to wrap up, it's time to get your predictions in, which is not always the greatest thing for all guests, because they all no one wants to make a prediction because it'll come back to bite them at the end. But I'm going to ask you anyway. You can be as ambiguous as you want. But let's start with the county championship. Do you think that Gloucestershire will get promoted back into Division 1 this season?
Well, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to give head prediction and heart prediction. The heart says they'll get promoted, they'll bounce back, they'll go straight back up. But I think the head is telling me it's very difficult just to bounce back immediately sometimes. Often it just takes that 1 year of kind of settling down again, starting at it really fresh and going hard at it. I think they should be certainly in the top half of the Division 2 table. You'd be disappointed, I think, if they finished any lower than that. But I don't know, that the head's saying sort of 3rd, 4th kind of position at the moment, especially with that loss of pain for the first few matches and seeing the effect that had at the end of last year. Although, of course, they will be getting Matt Taylor back. But anyway, I'm digressing. You said quick, so
yeah. No, it's all right. And then One Day Cup, you mentioned earlier, you think they might have a decent chance, but we don't know how it's going to go. Right now, from where we're sat, what would you say about their positioning? Would they get to the knockout stages, or do you think maybe just a group finish?
Well, I'd like to say yes. I think this is one instance where the head and the heart kind of align. I think they should be making the knockout stages of that competition. Exactly how far they go, I'm not certain. I'll say sort of, yeah, maybe semi-finals, something like that. I'm not sure, but I would be quite disappointed after the work that they've done the last couple of seasons if they couldn't build on that and make a good run.
Yeah, and then finally, of course, the Vitality Blast. You mentioned earlier some issues there, perhaps. Do you think that they will get to a knockout stage of that, or where do you think they'll finish in the South Group?
Well, I think just briefly looking at the last couple of seasons, they've had basically identical seasons, even with those players in. They've narrowly missed out. They haven't beaten a single side that made the quarterfinals. So that shows you kind of where they were. And then you take players out of that. It is hard to see how they're going to be really pushing for quarterfinal contention. But as I said earlier on, you just never know. Somebody could have a big season. I'm just not sure that as it stands, they're looking like one of the top 4 teams in that South Group.
Well, you never know. Who knows? Hopefully for Gloucestershire fans out there, they will get some silverware to their name this year. It'll be interesting to see. Ed, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to you at home for watching as well. And we will see you next time.